My name is Guru. I'm the founder and CEO of Scispot. So I'm going to start with a quick introduction of Scispot. So we provide a life science tech stack. Our really goal is to help accelerate lab workflows. So when scientists work at the bench or lab technician work at the bench, we want to make sure there are no bottlenecks and they can process their samples, they can run their experiments as fast as possible. The reason we are doing this event focusing on how to evaluate LIMS today is because in the last few years, we had over 1,000 labs evaluate lab information management system or systems similar to LIMS. And we found they have very similar requirements. Different type of labs need different features based on the stage of their growth, based on how early they are, and also the industry vertical. So we're going to share some of those insights and open the floor for questions. Please ask as many questions as possible. We will be checking our LinkedIn every few minutes. So if there's any question, feel free to jump in and ask questions. Alrighty, so what we're gonna cover today. So before we even talk about how you evaluate a LIMS, we wanna set the stage, really get alignment on what is LIMS, because people use the term interchangeably for ELN, LIMS, SDMS. We're gonna cover that, make it really clear. Why do you need LIMS is our another focus. Then how do you compare LIMS with other lab systems? Why choosing the right LIMS matters. These tools are very sticky. One is it's longer than lifetime of average marriage among us. So generally, once you implement a LIMS, you have to stick with it. So it's better to be right when you make the decision. Otherwise, it's very expensive to switch. Then what are the challenges you face in your LIMS evaluation? So we're going to share all of that. So when you make the decision to get a new LIMS, implement a new LIMS, or switch to another LIMS, it's easier for you and not very hectic. So we created a whole playbook that we're going to share in a couple of minutes. Then we will talk about the evaluation guide we created, the tool. We can do a quick hands-on activity. So you can enter some of the things that are important to you and see how different LIMS compare with each other based on functionalities, based on their support and other things. Then if we have more time, we're going to give you a quick teaser of Scispot. Sounds good? I hope you're nodding. Alrighty. So what is LIMS? In simple words, it's a lab software that helps you standardize, automate sample-centric workflows. From the time you receive samples, you can receive samples from your external partners. You can receive samples from your internal labs, receive a request to process those samples. Then once you receive the request, you have to do the intake process, right? So generally, LIMS support you to automate the intake, registration, barcoding, labeling. So tracking these samples, especially for labs processing high volume of samples, is very important. Workflow automation. So you register the sample, you store it, now you have to process it. So when you process it, you want to automate that as much as possible using the LIMS. Integration with instruments when you process the sample, whether you're using qPCR, next-gen sequencing machine, or microscope, you name it. You want to make sure you can not just send the data like input, but also bring the data back, then do the analysis. Real-time analysis, creating reporting. In diagnostic labs, final product is always the report, or even in cannabis testing lab, or any material testing, contract research, final product is always the report. The requester doesn't necessarily care about the raw data, they care about the findings. If the samples are received from patient, you want to know if they are positive for some infections, some diseases, or if the cancer type is malignant or not. So you need a report, right? So generally, LIMS systems automate the report creation process. Once the report is ready, you have to deliver it automatically. So this is a typical workflow of any LIMS. Now, before I talk about other details, I do want to make it clear that every lab doesn't necessarily need a LIMS. Your lab needs a LIMS only if it has sample-centric workflows. For example, if it is a contract research organization, you receive samples from your biotech and pharma partners, you have to process them, and the volume is high enough, at least few hundred samples you're processing on a monthly basis, then you need a LIMS. If you just need to run more bespoke experiments, ideally you need more ELN. So we're going to talk about the differences between these systems. So CROs, contract testing labs, can be diagnostic labs as well. They receive either samples from patients or a clinic. Then CDMOs, and it can also be biopharma company, biotech company, for example, small molecule drug discovery company. They have teams designing compounds in silico, then in the lab, and then they need their high throughput screening team to screen those compounds. So that's very sample heavy workflow. So in that case, they need LIMS to process tens of thousands, if not millions of compounds smartly, because you cannot use spreadsheets for all of that. Now, everyone loves their spreadsheet. Everyone loves their paper, and I don't blame them. At the individual scientist level, it feels very flexible to just take notes on paper. It feels very flexible or convenient to just design a 96 well plate in your spreadsheet every time you are processing a sample. But as a company, it really hurts you. You lose your institutional knowledge. You don't end up standardizing things, and you end up spending at least 3x of more time. Then you lose sample traceability. So when you receive sample, what exactly you're doing with it. So each of the sample has its own story. So to tell the story of those samples, you need a centralized system that connects the dots. You cannot do it with 100 different spreadsheet paper. It can feel more cozy, convenient, but I don't think it's healthy or scalable. So that's why we recommend using more structured system. Alrighty, now let's talk about LIMS versus ELN, STMS. Many times I read notes from our sales calls, and potential customer says, I'm looking for a LIMS system. But when we ask them questions, we realize, oh, they're just looking for ELN, right? They're looking for something for unstructured data capture. In some cases, they are just looking for more of a data lake or SDMS. They want to bring their sample data in one place from instruments, from their experiment, all the metadata, and do the analysis. But LIMS is more a sample workflow centric. If you don't need to process your samples, registering, processing, and creating report, bringing data from instruments in between, then you probably you're not ready for LIMS yet. For LIMS, you need some level of maturity to even consider it. And there are many systems in the market. They say they have LIMS in their R&D cloud offering, but that's not technically a LIMS. They are more unstructured and registries, and that doesn't really support sample-centric workflows, especially if they're high throughput in nature. So you need like a proper um, LIMS, modern LIMS alternative to process hopefully millions of samples as you grow. Other confusion that we see quite a bit is between LIMS and LIS. So LIMS is Lab Information Management System, but then you also have lab information, just lab information system. That's more like LIS. LIS is more patient-centric, more relevant in healthcare diagnostic. LIMS is very broad. It's more horizontal in that nature. that it can be cannabis testing, it can be your biofuel, it can be oil and gas, it can be any industry vertical. It's sample centric, but LIS is very patient centric. Generally, you need integration with EHMR system, electronic health record, electronic medical record system. For LIMS, you need to support lab workflows, which are sample centric. You have to process those samples, bring data from instruments. So integration with instruments become really important. Compliance needs are also slightly different between LIS and LIMS. But if you need a LIMS and more healthcare diagnostic, there's a good chance you need many LIS features too. So just so we are clear on these definitions. Any questions? Ask on LinkedIn. I'm going to quickly check if there are any questions. No questions so far. Now, let's start talking about why choosing the right LIMS is important. As I said, LIMS is very sticky. If your business remain active, arguably you will end up staying with one LIMS for a very long time. And we see companies coming to us after building custom LIMS or buying some traditional enterprise LIMS. And it's really painful for them because they are comfortable with very rigid workflows, and familiarity is always convenient, is always gives cozy feeling. So migration is very painful and also expensive because many traditional LIMS have data locked in. So most of the data in the right format is also not exposed through API endpoints. So migration becomes a challenge. So we really encourage companies to, even if their needs are very limited, they want to choose a LIMS that future-proof their business. So you can scale on top of the LIMS rather than choosing one LIMS and then after 2 years just to realize you have to switch. It's very expensive. So highly recommended to do more research, and you can use our evaluation sheet. Obviously, it will. We created this, so it's slightly biased. So use it as a base, create a copy, change it, make sure it's a perfect fit for you. But I think you will have a great starting point to create your own evaluation tool using the evaluation kit we will share in a bit. Challenges, I think it's very obvious. Many LIMS have long implementation time. It can take 6 months, 1 year. It's painful if you're running more fast-growing business. It doesn't make sense to prioritize something that would take 1 year. You need some level of instant gratification, even if it's incremental in nature. So that's very painful. Smaller business, you cannot dedicate 2 or 3 people just to focus on that. So you need something more advanced that can be set up, that's more pre-built, more like a jigsaw puzzle, so you can configure it for your needs really fast. Then there are so many LIMS vendors. We don't like the term LIMS for our product offering, but because industry understands that term, we created the next breed of LIMS, which is more data focused, more data lake as the heart of the product, then built-in integrations, configuration using no code. But traditional LIMS are very painful. So I wouldn't recommend choosing them if you are especially a smaller company, a newer company. If you want to pick something that will remain relevant in 10 years. Alrighty, now we have enough starting point. I'm checking if there is any questions. Nope. So now how can you use the evaluation tool to pick the best LIMS? And best LIMS can mean many different things for different labs. If you're just processing a few hundred samples a month, there's a good chance you don't need all the bells and whistles. You don't need integration with instruments. You don't need automated ETL, like more transformation layer. You can do that manually if there's very few handful of samples. So you don't want to necessarily buy a Ferrari if you don't have infrastructure set up. So that's why I believe it's really create your own evaluation system, and this guide will help you rather than just going to review sites. They are all marketing channels. I would highly recommend you try to get your hands on these tools. Start with 3 months, 4 month pilot to really see if people would love using it. If you pick something traditional, invest 100K or quarter a million just to realize it's painful to use. You don't want to do that. So hopefully this guide will help. Now let's go to the guide. So we created this evaluation sheet. There's a matrix how we score it. You have essential features. So like all features don't necessarily, they are not must have for all the labs. So there's a good chance 30% of the features are essential for you. Remaining 30% are optional, so you don't care about it, but you think in the future it will be relevant. Some are preferred. So we created the score system based on that. If it's essential for you and the vendor provides it, they get 8 marks. If this is, let's say, preferred for you and the vendor provides it, they get 4 points. So we created the point system, which is fair. And we also tried to capture all the features, functionalities labs need. And again, this is based on decent subject size. Over 1,000 companies evaluated Scispot in the last few years. So we tried to capture everything as much as possible here. So core functionality of every LIMS is obviously you should be able to manage your samples. So most labs need it. So let's put it essential here. Then freezer management. If the volume of samples is high, you have multiple labs, multiple storage units like -80, liquid nitrogen, different shelf racks, you name it, you should be able to track it, boxes, plates. You need a freezer management functionality. So if it is not needed, let's say vendor two doesn't offer it, they will not get penalized for it with the scoring system. And Scispot in this case provide freezer management, but if you don't care about it, Scispot will not get extra points. It's 632. Even if I remove it, it's 632. So you can play with it and see if there are additional features you want to add, like compliance and security. For more healthcare focused labs, HEPA compliance is important. In Canada, local, more like HEPA counterpart, like FEPA or FIPA, is important. In UAE, there's another requirement. So there are different geographical compliance. So based on what is important to you, you can create new compliance items that you want to evaluate LIMS for and decide if they are the best fit or not. Role-based access control, even if your lab is an early stage, I would recommend making sure the LIMS you choose has role-based access control, because protecting your data is important. There's a good chance you will end up inviting your external partner to your LIMS, or new team members, interns, or you name it. So you should have, as a super admin or someone at your company managing LIMS, should have that power to decide the level of access at the very granular level. So I would highly recommend looking for this whenever you evaluate a LIMS, and that's a requirement to be compliant to. Then integrations. We see labs automating like end-to-end test processes. We have one customer, for example, in the UK. They receive samples from different clinics, and they automated the whole thing, from receiving samples to loading plates to sending it to qPCR machine, bringing the data, calculating the CT value, generating the report, sending the report back to the customer. In between, there's some electronic signature process, and they're scaling really fast. And then we have many such examples like that in Canada, in the US, in Japan, and other parts of the world. So I would highly recommend, when you evaluate LIMS, you're processing significant volume of samples, double check if they have integrations. And some vendors say they have integration, but they sometimes say mean that they only have API that makes their system integrable. But that's not really integration. Integration mean it's more built in, so your team doesn't have to invest thousands of dollars on a monthly basis just to build and maintain it. It's painful to maintain these integrations. So you want to check if a vendor is capable of providing built-in integrations. But if you're a tiny lab, you don't care, then you can just say, this is not needed for me. Scispot provides it, but this third vendor doesn't provide it. They will not get penalized. So you are calculating the score based on what you need. Compatibility with iPad. So when you work at the bench, you have different contexts, right? At the bench, you are basically executing things. You are using instrument, you're following the recipe, you're following the protocols. But at the desk, it's a different context. You are planning, designing, preparing for test experiments. If it's not completely templatized, then it's more bespoke. You still have to design it. So you want to make sure your LIMS support at least different contexts, like at the desk, office, but also at the bench. So very basic things, barcode printer and scanning functionality. So you want to make sure your LIMS can print labels in different dimension, first generate them and print it, ZPL format, and there are a few popular ones, Brady and other LIMS. So these are the things you want to check. You want to say, I have these 3 printers. Can you show me how will you support the barcode creation, printing? Very very granular things, but it does help evaluating the system. Automation can be very powerful. I know it's overused term, but it can be powerful in a way. Labs have very unique DNA. For example, some labs, when every time they receive a sample, they want to auto create a backup ID for backup sample. They, in some cases, they want to automatically load 96 well plate or 360 well plate. In some cases, they just want to directly store samples they receive in their freezer based on the information, based on the capacity of that freezer, if it has a space or not. So you want to make sure if there are things you are manually doing on a daily basis, it would be nice if LIMS can automate those trivial things, because you end up saving hundreds of hours per year, if not more. So automation I would recommend, but not automating everything. You want to prioritize things that you are doing manually on a day-to-day basis, like I gave the example for. Now it comes to when it comes to data analysis, reporting, there are very specialized needs for based on the type of instrument you use. If your assay is more qPCR or next-gen sequencing machine, how do you want to bring the data? Obviously, you don't want to store the raw data. You want to transform it. You only want to turn it selectively into a tabular format. You want to analyze CT value in qPCR cases, and sequencing more like variability. You want to do the QC before you process the sample, after you process the sample. So you want to detect those things automatically. If your LIMS is not configurable enough, and for every small thing you will have to contact your vendor, it's probably not a fit, because then in many cases, LIMS vendor will also charge you for custom work. So you want to make sure it's out of the box, so they are not writing thousands lines of code, and they have to charge for that too, because system is rigid. They have to build these custom features, and it's very expensive and bad experience. I was speaking with someone yesterday. They said they not going to name the system. They implemented a system because they prepare a recipe, they test the material they produce in their lab. So every time they need to add new metadata, they have to contact the vendor, and then they receive bill from the vendor on a regular basis. So you want to avoid a very custom, especially if you're a modern lab, smaller company, SMBs. But if you're a massive company, then maybe there are some advantages to pick a big enterprise vendor. User training and support. Um, Even if the system is very out of the box, you always need guidance. So if you get white glove support, that would be amazing. So I would consider advancing, basically evaluating LIMS based on that. And your time zone, where the vendor is located, if they have support, what is their response time, if they will help with initial setup. What about if your workflows evolve, test evolve? Do they have no code configuration so you can tweak your workflows in the system rather than buying another tool or keep using Excel for 80% of your work? So you don't want to do that. You can avoid these things if you evaluate the LIMS smartly. I don't want to go over laundry list of things and end up boring you. Let's pick one or two things. Budget is very important. Some companies even prefer open source. Not my favorite, but because you have to worry about maintaining it, scaling that product, it's painful and generally create too much dependence on one or two people who are managing your internal LIMS. On premise, not my favorite either. We don't support on prem for that reason. Now we are seeing even big pharma moving towards cloud based. But if this is important to you, you can evaluate based on that. In that case, Scispot will get penalized because we don't support. But let's say other traditional vendor supports it, they will get extra points for that. So that's more evaluation sheet. If Let me see if there's any question, because I can share this. If someone on Scispot team can share this on LinkedIn in the comment section, that would be amazing. So if you are watching this video on whatever channel, create a copy. Someone on our team will share the sheet with you on LinkedIn comments and other channels in the comment section. You can play with it, add few vendors you are evaluating at the moment, and see what LIMS will work for you. I will move to slides back to give you a quick teaser of Scispot in a bit, but I'm gonna wait a minute or two. Okay, sheet is shared, at least on LinkedIn. There is a question. Let's do it. I will see a question in a bit. Team member is typing. Oh, it's not a question. It's like, can we have slides afterwards? Sure. We can also make it public, or you can also email us, team@scispot.io. I'm happy to speak with you too. Someone more qualified giving demos from my team can also give a very detailed demo and also go over this evaluation sheet. Looks like there's no question. It's just a request. Alrighty, let's go back to slides. It's a quick demo. So as I mentioned, when you process a sample, it has its own journey, and you need a system that connects the dots. So you receive your test orders from your external partners, your clinic partners, your patients, your customers, your biotech customers, if you're more CRO company. So you need a system to be able to receive or let them, your partners, submit samples. Or if you don't want that, you don't have leverage over your partner. So you can ask them to submit the samples using some tool. Your LIMS should support a more CSV-based, spreadsheet-based sample ingestion. We support it, but we are currently showing you more customer portal side. Oh, there's one question. Do you provide QMS capabilities. Yeah, I should have mentioned more about QMS functionalities too. Yes, so all the methods you create with versioning activity log, you can manage in Scispot. You can receive alerts based on if there's anything expiring, if there's any compliance alerts. So you can set up those things. But QMS can also mean 4 or 5 different things. But yes, we provide all these basic QMS functionalities to help you capture the versioning, activity log, making sure you have the full audit trail at the level of sample, at the level of test, at the level of personal. So yes. So no other question? No, let's come back to the demo. So you received the sample from your partner. Now you want to automate the intake. So if you use Scispot's customer portal, you can automatically capture it. But you receive samples in your, like physical samples in your lab, you should be able to scan it, ingest it, capture all the data. So as I mentioned, sometimes you need automation. You want to create like backup samples, and you want to automatically load a plate, or you want to automatically store the sample in specific storage containers. So you can set up all those rules. In GIF, you don't see it, but Scispot has those automation capabilities. Happy to show this after the call. Let's do the full screen. Now, samples are registered. What's next? You obviously need to be able to process the sample. You want to make sure when you're processing the samples, it's connected with your inventory. You can design a multi-well plate if it's a plate-based workflow. You want to directly send this to your instrument as the input file. You want to bring the output, not just like plate readers, but also like liquid handlers. If you're doing aliquoting, mixing, and liquid handler, you want to make sure they talk to each other. You want to bring the data back. Then you want to create a report. So ideally, you should be able to set up your report templates in the system. We allow that. We even allow you to create more custom template, but we have a few out-of-the-box templates. Then you want to send the report to your partner. So we automate all of that, but you can also standardize different type of workflows if you have multiple assays using Scispot. You can see it looks pretty too. One of the prettiest LIMS. And I mean it. We invest most of our energy making sure our platform is intuitive, modern, and even younger workforce and bioeconomy. They find the system usable. Last thing we want is people using the system because they are forced to use it. We want to make sure they love using it. In the beginning, it's always there is some inertia. People don't want to adopt a new system, but our goal is within few weeks to start loving the system. So we invest quite a bit of time making sure plates are intuitive, making sure we use AI to do all the dirty work in the background. When you bring data from instrument, AI can do the calculation. It can help you standardize your templates, help you load your plates. So we invest time on all of that. So we have one AI agent called Plato, which basically automates all the workflows related to plates. Then we have other cool AI agents like Proto, Reporto, Analytico. They're cute names, but our goal is make them sound more humanized and get people adopt them and benefit in their day-to-day lab workflows. Instrument, again, not just providing API. You want to make sure there are built-in integrations. And every instrument will not support API-based integration. In that case, you want to make sure there is like more global agent that we provide. So extracting data from instrument is one piece, but what is more important is doing transformation, extracting the right kind of data that is required for your report. And if you need to visualize things, if you need to do QC, if you want to detect out of spec in real time. So your system should support all of that. Otherwise, why do you even need a LIMS, right? So you always want to ask this question. Not just sample traceability, not just location tracking of samples, but you also want to make sure it reduces error rate in your test that you perform. Compliance is big. Whenever you apply for CLIA compliance or CAPA or any compliance, if you have a proper LIMS implemented, your compliance process is very fast because you have everything audit ready. So you want that. You want to make sure your LIMS will support you whenever you want to get your next set of compliances. So it should be able to support that journey. This is very unique to Scispot. So basically, you can analyze your data, create custom dashboards using LLM, just like you speak with ChatGPT. You can chat with your data captured in Scispot. Unlike LIMS, which basically support your workflow, but not necessarily what you can do with your data. So we want to make sure you can leverage AI sitting on top of your platform, and you can visualize things, analyze things, create reports, and track not just operational, but also lab experiments, lab test data. I'm checking if there's any other question. What is unique about Scispot when compared to other LIMS out there? The one I'm showing you, that's a very unique differentiator. Your data is stored in an AI-ready format. It's well tagged, cleaned up automatically. It's connected with your instrument. So every test you run, it makes your company smarter in a way. And this data is accessible to Scispot AI in your interface. We don't train any model. So you can chat with your data. And it's very user intuitive. You can even tell this with screenshots. It looks very modern. Some users said this a couple of weeks ago, months ago, that it felt like moving from Windows to more Apple devices. So it's very true. So user interface, integrability, AI readiness, fast implementation because very out of the box template based, just to name a few. Then you can also, I've already mentioned that you can monitor the data and workflow projects happening across your company using Gen AI. You can create dashboards, you can create reports. So it basically supports the entire journey of your sample. Anything else? Nope. Any further questions? So I'm going to wait like 60 more seconds. If there are no questions, happy to share this evaluation sheet if it is already not shared with you. And also happy to arrange a call with some of our team members. And happy to meet too directly if you would like to just speak and bounce ideas while you are evaluating a system for your lab. So happy to share some of the unique insights we have gathered speaking with thousands of labs in the last few years. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to, if you would like to learn more about LIMS lab software, we can do these events more frequently and share things we learn from our day-to-day operation, but also supporting so many different kind of labs. So happy to do this more frequently too. So let us know if this is what you would like to see more. Thank you, folks. Bye-bye.